socks for a long time, and many of you have as well. So you probably have a bin or a box or a bag or lots of boxes, bins, and bags that contain little bits of leftovers. Little balls of sock yarn, little balls of worsted weight, little balls, you have balls and more balls of leftover yarn. What do you do with all that? So in today's podcast, I want to give you some ideas. I'm going to show you how I'm going to deal with some of my leftover skeins, you know, the little minis. Maybe it's 5 grams, maybe it's 10 grams, maybe it's even half a skein. So what I wanted to do this week is give you some ideas on how you can use up some of those and make some fabulous stuff. Some of the scraps that I have are like mini skeins I've received from various promotions or, you know, sock clubs or whatever over the years. So obviously these are generally about 5 grams or 30 yards each, 25 to 30 yards each, and they'll need to be wound into, you know, little balls like that. This is just leftover from a pair of socks that my daughter made, actually. So we'll need to, you know, determine how many yards we think there is. But depending on the project that you're going to use, it may not matter. You know, I'm going to make a wrap or a shawl for my daughter, where I can just simply start knitting with one color, and then when I run out, I'll ask her what color she wants next, and she can plan that out ahead of time, or she can just tell me as we go. I think that'll work fine as long as you're using similar weights in the same project. So for example, this might be a little thinner diameter or smaller diameter than this Socks That Rock. This is a Socks That Rock Blue Moon Fiber Arts Socks That Rock medium weight. I think it's medium weight. So that's certainly a larger diameter than this scrap here, which is the Gradient Stroll, and that's a pretty thin fingering, pretty light fingering actually. You know, if you're making a shawl, it may not matter too much if you put these together. As long as you understand that this is going to be a more light and airy fabric, then this will be more dense if you knit them on the same needles. So I probably would try to pair together things that are, you know, a little more closely matched than these, despite the color. Okay, so if you don't have an unlimited pile of scraps or leftovers, then you actually need to know how many yards you have. Like I might need to know how many yards I have of this particular color or that purple one over there. Then I'm going to put it on here. This is an Amish Swift or a scanner. And if you don't have one of these, you can use a turned over chair, you know, with the chair legs, stick like a kitchen chair that's turned upside down. And then you would simply go around one time, and you would measure the length of going around one time. So I know, because I've done this before, I know that if each of these pegs are on the last hole of each arm, one time around is 60 inches. So all I need to do right now is wind off all of this onto here, and then count the strands, and then simply do the math, multiply that by 60 inches, take the total, and divide that by 36, and then I can tell how many yards I have. So the bowl is pretty helpful to keep the ball of scrap yarn from rolling all over. So once we're done winding this on the Amish Swift, or also known as a skeiner, then as I mentioned earlier, we're just going to count the strands that we have and do the math, and then we'll know how many yards we have. So we have a ball winder that makes it super easy to measure off and then wind it back up. If you didn't, you could simply wind it by hand after you measured it using your upturned kitchen chair like I mentioned earlier. So then you would still know how much you had of each scrap, and then you would just put it in a little Ziploc with a label, or, you know, tie one of those string tags on there that indicates how many yards you have of each kind. Then we're just arranging the order in which we might want to knit them. If you like to have things mixed up and crazy, or you want to have things more of a gradient color from dark to light, or vice versa. So you just want to kind of plan out what the order in which you want to do that, and then just start knitting. Alright, so after you've determined how much you have of each color and what you like, maybe what you don't like, there's a couple other ideas. Several Ravelry groups I've belonged to in the past, people will actually organize a swap, and they'll post, you know, how many yards of what colors, and take a picture and post what they have, and they'll organize a swap. So maybe you have a friend who knits socks and you have some colors that she wants, or vice versa, and you can swap stuff. So that's a lot of fun to get new yarn in the mail that's new to you that maybe somebody else is done with. So I hope I've given you some ideas. I'll put some links below on some various patterns that would be lots of fun to stash, dive, use up some leftovers. There's the sock yarn mitered square blanket by Shelley Kang. That's on Ravelry. There's a hexagon one that my friend Val from British Columbia. You knit lots of little hexagons and then you stuff them, and it's like a little hexagonal pillow. And then you somehow attach all that and you end up with this poofy hexagonal quilt. So, I mean, it takes like, I don't know, 400 or 500 of these little hexy puff something. Anyway, link below for that. So I'm going to make the scrap sock yarn shawl for my daughter so she can enjoy that. Well, she just wants it for lounging around, reading her book, doing her schoolwork, you know. So I'm going to use the pattern that I'm going to use for that is called the Utilitarian Faroese shawl. Maybe you're not pronouncing that quite right, but I'll put the link to that below. It's written for worsted weight, but because you knit it until it fits your shoulder. You start with a shawl cast on, you do increases, and you knit it until it fits your shoulder. So really you could use any yarn that you want because you're just going to go until you're done, right? There's really not a gauge. You just knit it till it fits, till it's as big as you want it to be. So then there's several. I've thought about doing just a regular boomerang shaped shawl. There's one that's free called Raspberry Fields. That lends itself pretty well. So you just need to decide how you want to do it. Decide what you want to use those up for. Of course, scrappy socks. You can do the Russian join to knit a while with the one color, and then you can do a Russian join to add your next one. If you're doing a garter stitch shawl that's just garter stitch back and forth, you know, probably nobody's going to see that tiny little square knot if you weave in your ends. So it depends. You can do either one of those. I will put a link down below to the Russian join video that I've made where it shows how you would join two skeins, two ends together. So I hope I've given you some ideas about how to use up some of those leftovers. If you appreciate these videos, consider hitting like and subscribe, and I appreciate your support. All right, knit on, my friends.